Okay, so this panel is a group of CISOs that I actually know very well. Several of them I've worked with before and sit on many organizations. We're going to go through and run through some different questions for the panel, but I also want this to be interactive. So if you have questions, and tech team is probably going to kill me for this. If you do have questions, please raise your hand, and I'll try to hear them and reiterate them to the panel. Alrighty? So please make it interactive. Starting right here, Bill, if you can introduce yourself real quick, and we're going to just run down. The point of this is not just so you know who's on the panel, but also their industry. So if you do have questions, we can kind of direct them specifically to individuals. Alrighty?
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Higgs. I am the CISO for Cymer and the U.S. Security Officer for ASML. ASML is jokingly known as the largest tech company you've never heard of. We produce the machines to make semiconductors, and 85% of the world's semiconductors are made on our equipment.
Hey, everybody. Nick Ryan. I was the former CISO for Baker Tilly in the accounting industry. Been in the accounting industry for 12 years. As of 2 weeks ago, I'm now the vCISO for RSM. You've all heard of the big four in accounting. RSM is number 5, so I'm moving up in the world.
Hey, everybody. I'm JJ Powell with Cyber Defense Group, vCISO. We conduct security assessments, risk assessments, help companies grow from SMB to a Fortune 500 company.
How about this? Oh, hello, hello. I'm Emily O'Carroll, head of Global Information Security, IT Risk and Compliance at Topgolf, Callaway brands. We now fall in a few industries. So Callaway Golf, where's my friend MJ back there with his nice hat? There he is. So Callaway, historically known as a manufacturing company, right? We manufacture golf clubs, balls, etc. We have had several acquisitions. So OGIO is now under Topgolf Callaway brands. Travis Matthew, shout out over here. So in the retail space now, Jack Wolfskin, which is an outdoor apparel, camping gear brand in Germany. And then most recently, Topgolf and all of their brands. So we're in food, entertainment, all the things, and a lot more risk to add to the table, which is so fun. No, it's been exciting, though. So I've been there about 8 years now.
Hi, my name is Kevin Smallen. I work for PenChecks. I'm the CISO at that organization. We're a financial services company dealing in different types of plans and retirement for individuals.
Hey, everybody. I'm Billy Norwood. I'm the CISO for FFF Enterprises. I also had never heard of them. They're out of Temecula. We're in healthcare and pharmaceuticals, heavy in distribution, but also have some SaaS products, IoT products, and expert decision-making systems.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Can I also ask some of the people in the back to kind of keep it down or take it outside? That's much better. Thank you. I just want to be respectful of everybody online as well as the panelists. So I'm going to start off with my first question. I present to boards many times on a regular basis, but everybody still struggles with it, and especially those that have never been able to go up there. I know, like, doing your research, I mean, not to sound like IR, but going through and doing your reconnaissance and everything else on your board members before you go present. I want to ask a question to the panel. What's one takeaway that you would give a CISO or security leader, because let's be honest, sometimes the IT manager is the poor person responsible for security. What is one kind of takeaway that you could give them to be more effective communicating your cybersecurity needs and the risks to essentially the board, or let's say business leaders, so it could be the ELT, the executive leadership team maybe, if you're not getting to the board?
Yeah, when I go to the board, first off, you have to get a seat at the board, right? You really
Kev,
have
can you bring a little closer?
You really have to make sure that you do get a seat, that you do that report, and and be present for that report at every quarter meeting. What I like to do is I like to build a story around real events. For instance, 3 years ago, I needed specialized software to continually check for misconfigurations in our cloud environments. And I pointed to the Capital One issue in 2019 with AWS, and AWS, said, well, it's not our problem, kind of thing. So it was a misconfiguration in a database that caused some grief for Capital One. So it was a bad situation, and I laid it out to the board in a nice way and wrapped in real events and scared them just a little bit, and it was effective in getting the funds that I needed. So you just got to have a story you're going with and have examples to show, and it works pretty well.
That was good.
Yeah, I would add a couple things here. Number one, stay away from FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, doubt. Executives don't like to be put in a corner, and they don't like to make decisions out of fear, right? So stay away from that. I would also say, you want to show, you want to show the roadmap. You want to show where you're going, where you're taking it. You want to show ROI, how they're actually going to be, making money, or going to be, saving the company from, fines and regulation violations, things like that. You also want to tie to things that they care about. They understand. They don't really care about cyber and IT for the most part, right? They care about risk. They care about cyber insurance. They care about things that they can actually understand. So know your audience, and I would say just focus on the things that matters to them.
You guys nailed it. I think know your audience is a huge one, and find the executive support to help you prepare for that. I think that's been huge for us. Know which committee within the board you're presenting to. So for example, at Topgolf Callaway Brands, we present to the audit committee. They're uber focused on risk and governance, so translating things to risk is huge. We do multiple rounds of reviews with our head of internal audit, who presents to them more frequently than we do. We're there twice a year. Also, our CFO is there, and he has an incredible pulse on what the board is looking for, which is incredibly helpful. Also know now our board wants more. Everything was very high level, but now with some of the new SEC regulations that are still developing, there are more and more boards that are adding someone on the board that has that cyber background from an oversight standpoint. And so now we have a new board member who has a bit of a cyber background, and we're getting some pretty granular questions on the details behind our KPI data that we're presenting and things like that. So it's always good to have that backup. I love our appendix, because when the question comes up, I can usually refer them there.
And I'll say, don't get lost in the technical details either. I come from a technical background, so it took quite a while to learn to speak in risk and not in technical. And the people at the board level or the ELT, they don't care about the weeds. They don't care about those technical details. They care how it's going to impact their business and the risks of the organization. And that's why you see cybersecurity being sticky. Even in an economic downturn, cybersecurity is such a critical risk now that the boards can't ignore it. And so you have to speak to them in terms of risk, not the technical details. And so that was hard to give up, because I enjoy the technical part of it, but you have to understand you're a business person and a technical engineer as well.
And the only thing I would add is learn how to speak to business people. If you haven't taken a business course, take one. Learn how to speak their language. As they said, don't talk technical. They're not going to care how many phishing emails you blocked or anything like that. And also bring in industry standards. Bring in Gartner. Bring in other reports so you can show them what other people in your industry are spending and where you are in that matrix with them.
That was perfect, and I can't agree more. Less is more with the board. If you're taking more than 2, 3 slides max, and you probably should be at 2 or 1. If you're taking more than that, you're not presenting to the board. You're presenting to somebody else. They're not gonna want it. And to your point, Bill, if I'm presenting on firewall hits or something like that, they could care less. They want it all in the business side. So, and I'll be honest, I'll give JJ a plug real quick. If you're not used to working with the board or presenting, bring in a third-party virtual CISO that is, even if you spend it for 4 hours with that person, it is gold on what you're going to get to be able to go and at least learn and get educated. If nothing else, have them just look at your presentation and tear it apart. I mean, that in itself is just worth the money. So, actually, JJ, you mentioned the economic downturn, which I have a question here I want to put out. I'm sorry, I'm going to throw you on the spot first, but then for the others. And I'm actually going to make a comment, too, so I'm going to throw a little bit of a softball on this one. We're about to enter into an economic downturn. Why is security and compliance budgets still going to remain in place? I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, well, this is getting cut or this or that. I'll be honest, some of the organizations I support, now, don't get me wrong, some are government, so that money's kind of already there. But even on the commercial side, I've seen one client, they increased theirs by $23 million. I've seen other people where they don't want to spend money because they're not sure where things are going. The C-level are trying to hunker down because, they're worried about the economy. We've seen all the layoffs already start. What are your thoughts on whether or not how it's going to affect things?
Yeah, kind of to what I alluded to earlier, the cybersecurity is now a key risk to boards. They get that, if they have a ransomware outbreak, that they could go under, they could lose everything, or if, the reputation gets tarnished. Like, those are real risks to boards, and they care about that now. 5 years ago, when I would talk to boards or the ELT, a lot of them would not even pay attention in board meetings. They knew that I had to be there, but they would not necessarily pay attention. Yeah, but nowadays, like, it's one of the most, when I speak, all the eyes are on me because cybersecurity is critical to their business thriving and surviving. They don't want to be in the news. They don't want their personal emails out there in the news, which you've seen sometimes. So that you don't want to use fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but they do have the fear in them now of what cybersecurity risk can do to their organization. Again, speak to the risk, not the technical details, and offer them solutions to addressing that risk that make business sense, and then they'll understand what you're saying.
Anybody else?
So one thing that we're doing a lot that I'm kind of pushing forward is automation. So instead of, don't get me wrong, I'm asking for a new resource and automation tools, but
Good man.
Yeah, like they can tell me to cut it out, but I'm going to ask for as much as I can. Reach for the sky, right, and cut it down. But it aligns with what our business is doing. I mean, a lot of our businesses, if they aren't already looking at RPA, like most of them probably are, they're trying to optimize all sorts of operations across the business. And you show them that you have that same strategy for your entire team to be more efficient, just like they're doing across the business. It really sells that you know the business and you're aligning with them. And then hopefully you can still get your resource too.
Yeah, that's key. Aligning to the business and driving it to support it, it's a no-brainer. At that point, they're supporting you versus you're just asking for, a bucket of money.
I mean, in simplest terms, the reason why our budgets should not be going down is because our attackers' budgets are not going down. And that we can't disarm ourselves while they are continuing their attacks. The attacks are becoming more sophisticated, not to use FUD, but they are more sophisticated. The outcomes are more dangerous. We have to keep them at this level, or should.
Anybody else? If not, I'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, depending on what industry you're in, I mean, accounting is fairly recession-proof, right? I mean, regardless of what's happening, you still got to pay your taxes and have your audits done, unfortunately. So if you're looking for talent, this could be a good time to, turn the burners on and find some good people out there.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because the minute that I selfishly started seeing layoffs at different companies, I started mining my LinkedIn for engineers, directors, you name it. I was immediately just starting to look for who may have gotten affected that I could selfishly profit on. So, Hey, I'm also helping someone out, but I'm being honest. All right, well, let me ask a question, because the board part, I think, is really important. Do we have any questions out there with regards to boards that, like, we have individuals that speak to them on a regular basis that have any questions around that? It's okay if there aren't. I want to put that out there. Can I run? Sorry. Oh, perfect.
I was just wondering, how much does your internal IT security strategy differ from what you're actually running to what you present to the board?
So do you take the full strategy to the board, or are you only bringing in different pieces and parts for providing the risk?
Yeah, I would just say for me, so I did a 5-year game plan, roadmap at Baker Tilly. So each year they knew what they were getting, right? And of course there are some things that popped up unexpected. We didn't, anticipate this. We need to, but the idea is they understand the bigger picture. And so when I go to them, I'm only going to them with that year's initiatives, and then showing them how it ties into the larger strategy, right? Because then what I try to avoid is I don't want them to feel like I'm nickeling and diming them, right? Like, gosh, you just came to me last year. You need more? I could say, hey, no, this is a part of the whole thing that you all agreed to 5 years ago, right? And tie it in that way.
Yeah, just like for some background context, I'm their first full-time CISO. They had a fractional CISO for 4.5 years before I started. So for me, they do really want to see the plan. I'm not telling them exactly what tools I'm getting, but I have them kind of in segmented and like moving from maybe some freeware type tools, something open source that my team's using, to more and more enterprise tools, and kind of give them a choice, like how fast do we want to spend. It was kind of funny because one of the guys who's like actually the chief revenue officer, we don't have a board, it's privately owned. He's just like, hey, well, can we just throw this much money on it? I haven't done in a year. And I'm like, well, you got to like fight through teaching everybody. This is the new thing. We're doing IAM reviews. We're doing access reviews. There's a lot of things. Projects are being different now. We're dropping security in the forefront. So I give them kind of a taste of everything. But I mean, you can't get down in the weeds with them at all. But you definitely do. You don't want to leave things out. You can't, because if they find out that you're not telling the truth, I mean, what happened to that guy at Uber, right? It can get nasty.
Yeah, for me, for the most part, the plan fits to what we give to the board, but there are occasions where it changes. When we work really closely with the compliance department. We were lucky enough to have a separate compliance department. And compliance changes, right, every year. So sometimes we have to turn on a dime to ask for, another package, another tool to help us cover that compliance issue that comes along.
One last thing I'll add, and that wasn't mentioned in the board discussion, is, so we take our project roadmap similar to what others have mentioned, and we present to the board the next 2 years what's coming, but we don't get at the granular project detail, more at the program level. So, we consolidate all the smaller projects into an overall program to present to them. And then we also do a mapping. We use a NIST CSF framework to assess our maturity, and we bring in a third-party auditor similar to RSM to do that. And so we map our program to that, because they ask a lot of questions about why we're doing what we're doing. And, does it align with our industry, our peers? It is very important, I've found, to the board. Like when I first joined, I came from an audit firm doing consulting at KPMG, and I said, this is what I used to do. I can just do it for us. But they really rely heavily on that third-party assessment, no matter how strong your team is, I've found. So I think sometimes mapping, definitely transparency and honesty is paramount. If you're not, I think it can bite you in the ass later, for sure. But at the same time, you don't want to get so granular in the weeds with, the technical project details.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Emily. She is probably one of the strongest security leaders because of her background, because I've watched her through her careers. Exactly what you said, spot on. I was almost going to make a joke. We have a question from online. I was going to say caller number 3. We have a panel question. In your own opinion, do you think that zero trust strategy will be widely adopted after the White House announcement? Oh, I have my own comments on this, but I'm going to let you guys go first.
I feel like this was just handed me.
I'm scared because it seems like nobody wants to answer.
It really is all the buzz right now. I actually sat on a panel for like a Vanta Gartner, if any of you are familiar with it, to talk about this, from some of us, that have been around a little bit of good time, to longer, on what this really means now. But everyone is that. A lot of places are continuing to do remote workforce, maybe only a couple times a week, maybe fully. Our company decided to hey, if you don't want to come back to the office, you don't have to. For the people that don't have pharmacists, have to go to the office, right? But I don't think it has to do, especially with what the White House is saying. I think it's an industry movement, and there's still some gray area. No offense to all the vendors, right? But sometimes the marketing kind of pushes everything. But yeah, it's least privilege and things that we've been doing for years. But with that expanded perimeter, we really do have to focus.
All right, vendors, cover your ears. I hate the word zero trust. That's just a marketing play. Trust but verified to me is more accurate, right? So the way that I would say it, really, there are principles in zero trust that make a lot of sense. Microsegmentation, having, there's just a lot there that's really good. Another thing that I like is the CISO advisories that come out. If companies would just simply follow what CISO pushes out as far as MFA, segmentation, we would be in a lot different place in terms of cybersecurity. So to me, I'd say focus on that. But.
Yeah, I can't agree even more on that. Zero trust is nothing new. Not to go back to government, but they've been doing those types of things since before I was even in IT, when I was still carrying a weapon and didn't do a keyboard. And I'll be honest, I can't stand the term because, and again, I love everybody out here, vendors and everything else, but when people come in to really focus on just that, it's not. All of these products are part of it, let's put it that way. But it's a process, it's a program, and it's tools. And it's not just one. I can't stress that enough. I actually like the idea that I was speaking to someone earlier, and they asked a similar question out in the hallway, and I said, when you talk about it, change the terminology. Just use a different word, and you will have a better conversation. Because they asked, what do CISOs do when they say zero trust? And it was immediately, I thought of eye rolls, of shutting off, the brick wall just came up. You name about it. So, I don't know. Any other thoughts?
No, I view zero trust as almost a misnomer because there's an inherent level of trust no matter what. I view zero trust as more of a concept, a way of thinking that we have to, it's more of like a theory, a way of thinking rather than zero trust across the board, which some people think when they hear that, but it's just different levels of trust. And it's based on circumstances. How does that trust alter based on those circumstances? That's almost like a better way to grasp what zero trust is.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad thing. Especially with the work from home. You have to think of what networks people are on. I've got some organizations where they literally came to me and they're willing to spend all this money to secure all their executives' homes. I was like, you want to put them on the network? And they're like, no, we just want to make sure they're secure. And they still have to VPN in. They still have to use their, all their other controls that the company provides them. They just don't want someone crawling around on their home. So when you start thinking about that, and I started to say a framework, and that's wrong. It's just thinking of it in a different way. And it really is a lot of different parts put together, not just one.
It's not the castle and moat mentality anymore. It's not defense in depth. It's depending what you're accessing at that point in time, at that time of day, by who you are and what you're on, then those are the different factors that are gonna change that affect zero trust. You know, so if you do something that's outside your norm, then yeah, they should zero trust you. Like, you should have to authenticate at different levels. But if you keep doing what you're doing over time, then there's a certain level of trust that comes into that, so you can do your job, you know.
Yeah, and if your users are just like, oh, I don't want to do another, MFA or this or that, or, government, well, it's more certs and YubiKeys, not cat cards as much, but all these different things, it really isn't that difficult. If my 16 and 18-year-old can do it with all the stuff that I require them to do for their emails and everything else, even, let's take it a different further. If my mother-in-law can do this, your users can. All right. Any other comments on this? No? Oh.
No offense to mother-in-laws out there. Just
Sure.
saying.
All right, so let me hit another one a little bit different. This is probably more towards my direction. At the top of everyone's mind, I did not write this, even though it sounds like it, is a nation-state attack. What is a real threat for ordinary organizations, and how much should they be concerned?
So we deal with a lot of SMBs, and it's a question I've got before.
Yeah.
And as a business, you deal with other businesses. You know, you may not directly supply like a Lockheed Martin, but you might work for someone who supplies a Lockheed Martin. There's attacks coming through. They know that supply chain's a risk, so they may compromise someone 2 steps down to get to their Lockheed Martin or Microsoft or whoever it is. So that's just one example, but is it intellectual property that you have? Is it protected information? Is it health information? There's something that you have that is valuable that you have to protect. And even if you're just a pivot point to something else because you're based in the US, that's a nation state's gonna exploit you if you're just sitting there. And they're not gonna care about cleaning up when they're done pivoting off whatever your server you have that's exposed to the internet with RDP open. So nation states, if you're a target, if you operate with other businesses, if you exist anywhere in the technical realm, which all businesses do now, you're a target for nation states. It's not, you are part of it now, whether you like it or not.
How many people here think they could beat off a nation-state attack? How many people think they could defend against a nation-state attack so they couldn't get in? The follow-up question is, how many of you does your board think that you should be able to do that when you do this? I'm going to quote Jason Callahan. He presented, and he states that you cannot defend against a nation-state attack. Basically, a security budget is a single-digit proportion of the IT budget, which is a single-digit proportion of the company budget. So with your single digit of a single digit, how are you going to defend against a fully funded, determined attacker when you do this? So what you can do is make sure that you can detect them after they're in, and have what we were talking in the zero trust discussion, the proper segmentation in, so that if they talk the receptionist into giving her credentials, that doesn't mean they're going to get to your source code, and put those different controls in place as well.
Okay, I'm gonna get a little spicy, but you should be, if you have TikTok on your phone, take it off, right? I would not allow TikTok on any corporate device, period. I would coach your executive teams, your board members, that they should be off of TikTok completely. That is, you want to talk nation state.
Or your children.
But what about marketing? Come on. Exceptions for
Facebook.
everybody, right? No, gosh. Oh, I'm going to be Macy and Darren's biggest cheerleader here. This is why in the keynote today they were talking about how important those partnerships are. Make sure if you don't have connections somewhere within your organization, if the local agents with the FBI are not in your incident response plan today, find out who those people are. I think you can talk to any of us on the panel and get them on your incident response plan. super important. Like everybody said, I mean, we all run businesses. Many of us have suppliers in China. We all know that. Think about when you're sending your team members out there, what kind of training are they going through? What devices are you sending them with? Things like that. And then make sure you have the help on speed dial in your incident response plan, that your board is aware of it, your executive management is aware of it, everyone understands the risks. These should be open conversations that you're having to decide, you know, who are you doing business with, where are you doing business. They're tough conversations to have, but if your companies aren't having them today, try to spark those conversations because they need to be had. So.
Speaking of relationships, if you are not a member of InfraGard, you need to join. Macy and I are both on the boards with InfraGard. It is a affiliated program with the FBI. It is free. You do have to go through a background check for it to join. And we're in luck in San Diego because we have one of the largest, most successful chapters in the nation, and it's very active. So please sign up for InfraGard.
Hey, I got in. Apply.
On a more serious note, I think one thing that is often overlooked is having travel restriction policies in play, you know, not letting people take devices to problematic countries. I don't know about everybody else, but you know, we've had surprises where we thought we've locked something down. A recent one we had, and I could talk about it because I'm no longer there, but we had somebody that showed up in Hong Kong, and we had China blocked, but Hong Kong was not, right? And that was an alarm to us, like, oh, well, what else are we missing? So you had to go and revisit and see what else has changed that we're not, you know, keeping track of. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to give, I didn't get to do any stories, excuse me, because I'll blame it on Darren, he talked too much. But talking about who will be targeted, one of the places I used to, another organization that I was at, their shipping and receiving clerk was targeted. And that's the one area when they're sitting in the warehouse that people aren't worried about. You know, given Facebook, everything else, it's not a big deal. What do they touch? Well, everything that we were making out of our manufacturing plant was, the parts were going in and out of that person's computer. You collect enough of that stuff, you can figure out ways to re-engineer it. So whether it's buying certain chemicals in your biotech or certain chips in your computer manufacturer, it doesn't matter. They're going to go for the easiest hit. They're not going to go for your security person. They're most likely not going to go for your executive. They're going to do their reconnaissance on who is the easiest person to get into. So I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, I just recently had a conversation with our HR department. It's a good idea to as security department, to really form that relationship with HR. You don't want to have an alert pop up on your screen saying successful, right? It's a scary thing when they're in a different country. So usually that, you know, find out that someone's on vacation, but just recently within the last month, the HR's new policy where they inform security when somebody's going out of the country. And we've also enforced the fact that if you go on vacation, you're not going to be doing any work, especially if you go in those countries that are slightly dangerous, right? So it's another policy we've put in place, and that we formed a really good relationship with HR to get that heads up. So for one reason, so all of our guys don't have heart attacks in the middle of the night when they see that alert come up. So we know what's coming. So
I have a hard question I'm going to throw on the tail end of this one with sort of towards the same thing. And I'm going to ask it, and I'm okay if you guys deny or choose not to answer it or choose to answer it for an organization that is not yours. That's that bad of a question. So real-world impact of an attack, how could that have an effect on your business? Like, and the reason why I'm asking this is because I want people to realize, if you're thinking about the product or the services you offer, I mean, these are the same things you'd have a discussion with your board on. And I'm not saying that you have this risk because you're vulnerable right now, but I'm trying to think of the worst case scenario that you would go through and why it would be such a concern. And the reason why is because I want everybody out here to start then thinking that way on their own organization. Do you guys understand the question? Anybody willing to answer?
So as a vCISO, we have access to other clients. So if we were to get compromised and one of our clients get compromised through us, we're out of business. We lose trust. That's our number one thing that we supply as a vCISO firm. So that is hands down a worst case scenario. That's worse than ransomware to us. So we can fire up a new Gmail, G Suite, or Office 365 and operate that way. But if one of our clients were to get compromised through us, then we all need to find new jobs.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, in the accounting world, you could just imagine, right? I mean, what does your CPA have of yours, right? All of your information, your social security numbers, your kids' names. I mean, if that were to be compromised, I mean, somebody could forge identities. Somebody can, steal money from you, right? I mean, we've seen attacks where, I can't say who, but let's just say there were, may or may not have been returns that were taken, and then the attackers would try to take them to H&R Block to get a refund advance on that return that's clearly not them, right? And so they would try to get out there and make a quick buck. And then when the legitimate person was trying to file the return, it would say, oh, you've already filed your return and we've already paid you. So what do you mean? And it becomes a big problem. So it definitely happens. And that's why you also got to be really careful about what information you're giving out. I would say that, there is information that accounting firms collect or people send them that we actually don't need, right? So limit what you send.
Yeah, on my side, since we are in healthcare, people think all the time like, oh, PHI, and we do have a pharmacy, we do have some PHI, but really it's downtime. We're a distributor, so is it the ransomware fee? No, we have the money, we can pay that off, even a fine for PHI, yeah, we can pay it off. It looks bad reputation. Most people get back over. I mean, you guys still shop at Target, right? Yep. But having a high-end downtime where we're not getting people medicine that they need in time, that's a real trust breaker. And as far as my CEO and the management team is concerned, that's the reason he started the business, is to help people out. And if we're not helping out, and we're going down, that's my ass, honestly. And so when we did a thing around ransomware, because it's hot, but the whole idea is being down, right? And we had the executive team in there just kind of understand little things. And I just showed them little things that we could do, like in our pharmacy, by having something off the network and backed up and then plopped in place to get us back on time in instead of 16 hours, be back up in 4 for $1,000 per pharmacy. And they were like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, right? And there's a lot more steps to go, but again, aligning to the business, showing them what truly matters to them. But yeah, sometimes it's not always about the big breach. That downtime is tough,
If you're in the manufacturing business, you also then open yourself up to kinetic damage. It's one, in the best of case, your line gets shut down. Worst of case, like Stuxnet, all of a sudden your machinery starts eating itself. Worse still, if you are using flammable liquids or combustibles, you may start having life safety issues at that point. So the factory, while obviously reputational and PHI and information like that is all bad and extremely bad, factories have a different level of concern as well.
Yeah, and I've got to throw something on that one. If your organization says that it's air-gapped, ask them how they monitor it. There is not a SCADA or IoT system on most critical infrastructure that I've personally looked at that doesn't somehow have some kind of feed out to be monitored, no matter what the network engineer or architect says. That's why there's companies that actually monitor SCADA systems and IoT on critical infrastructure. I would challenge those things to really look at. I'm not saying call BS on your teams, but just ask a lot of questions. I've watched a very non-technical executive pull a CIO and their team completely apart because all she was doing was just asking valid, simple questions that she was walking through in her brain. Well, what if I did this? How do you do this? You told me you monitor. You do the, you know, she was not going to try to throw rocks at them. She was curious. And when she did, it was absolutely eye-opening. Sorry, Emily.
All good. Yeah, so we deal a lot with consumer data, of course, in our retail space, and with Topgolf too, in the, you know, restaurant and entertainment industry. But, you know, like you said, customers are loyal to products, to brands. So I don't think it's the customer loyalty, although there's a limit, of course, in that. But, you know, with the consumer data, it's still the part that weighs on us the most is the potential damage, financial damage, if consumer data is actually compromised or it's a true legal breach. So that's a big deal to the board. That's a very big deal to the board, to finance, accounting, all of that. So, but for us, you know, it comes down to intellectual property. But everything is you have to determine what the business's risk appetite is. For example, you know, you look at our clubs that we make. The parts of those clubs, we outsource a lot of that to our suppliers, as does every other golf company. Many of those spaces at our suppliers are shared spaces, and while we have policies in place with them, we know that some of that data will be shared, but what, you know, the crown jewels really are is when we're releasing a new product. When the new Epic driver came out years ago, I just presented at the national sales meeting, which after, I think, 3 years, they finally did in person. And, you know, sometimes you just have to keep it simple in security, right, to get the buy-in from the business. So training people is super important, talking to them about physical security, about sharing things on social media, especially with sales folks that are privy to new products that are coming out. And then also, if you're going to get the buy-in for all these tools, you got to sell security a little bit too. Explain to them why it's going to make their lives easier. Like, okay, you're going to have multi-factor authentication, but you're also going to get single sign-on for all of these applications, and you get one portal and all of these other things. So, yeah, you got to make it attractive if you're going to sell it. You don't want to make everyone's jobs seem harder, and once they get used to it and they can adopt it, but getting that executive buy-in, the board buy-in to support you and understand why it's important is going to take you further in your program and help secure your organization at the end of the day.
That was a perfect, I want to dig at that for a sec. Sorry, Bill, my team used to call it, so I'm an East Coaster, was the New York handshake, so to speak, that you have to make sure that the business and IT, because you're in security, that means hopefully your budgets are separate, but you're also competing for different things. But if you don't get them, every time I'd come into a company as a new CISO, I'd spend my first amount of money in my first 6 months helping the CIO and the IT team out. What have you been struggling with? I'll go drive your initiative that you've been asking for 3 years that nobody, excuse my French, gives a shit about. And you go get that done. With that, all of a sudden you've got those champions, and all of a sudden you're able to drive stuff. You do the same thing with the sales team. I went to work for a pharmaceutical. Oh my gosh, I left Amex to go to pharmaceutical. Talk about people that wanted everything open. I mean, researchers, salespeople. I mean, it was miserable. But you have to be able to do that. So, sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead. That's a good way to close it.
Oh, all right. I did have a question coming from online, and we still have a few more minutes. Sorry, I'm trying to get from the text. Let's see if we can get this one. Is frictionless certificate authentication really more secure than conventional MFA? And I'm trying to see if they're trying to talk about YubiKeys or if they're actually talking about a CA. Let's throw it out this way. What are your thoughts? Because MFA certificates or YubiKeys? Like, what do you feel is the right step to take? And maybe it's just for the organization, because everybody's different.
I mean, I like MFA. I mean, I know people have issues with the SMS component of it. The certificate, to me, if somebody says we have MFA and it's a password and a certificate, I don't really buy that. That's not great, because you could still turn on the computer and get to the log-on screen to Windows. That's problematic. So, I mean, YubiKeys are great. I do like that. Microsoft PAW is a great way too, right? So you have an isolated, dedicated workstation to only access this tier of servers. So I like that, but.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah, I have like 5 MFAs. I don't like the texting because of SIM swapping, and that's only because I've seen that like at a high capacity for a nation state using. And YubiKeys, I mean, you can't get anything easier. You stick the thing in your laptop, put your thumbprint on it after it's done. I mean, if a salesperson or anybody else ever complains about that, they also have everything written across their entire laptop. So, and honestly, it's easier than typing your password. So, and no, I don't sell YubiKeys. All right, I just want to be respectful on time. I know we are at the 5 o'clock mark. I don't remember. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken. Thanks, Bill.
In my former profession as a financial advisor, I have used and still use Morningstar, which has a tool that measures companies' quality of performance, like profitability and all kinds of ratios. You can slice and dice in many ways to compare companies. In terms of, in my current profession in cybersecurity, I see one thing lacking is performance metrics, where the measurements are pretty superficial, like annual loss expectancy. They're not much. I think as CISOs, you could push to develop for, let's say, Gartner or even Attack IQ's MITRE system. So MITRE is a good chart to go by as a process and see how the threats and all this stuff has occurred. But in terms of the tools that you use, there's not much to measure the quality.
So are you talking about measuring specific tool metrics or a security program?
All the tools
or a risk register?
All the
'Cause
security.
those are 3 different things.
All the products that you use to protect your company and resources.
Okay, I'm going to change your question slightly, just to kind of narrow it down for the panel. When you go into a risk registry or register for your organization, you're doing it both on business risk. You're also looking at your tools on whether or not you're getting enough out of them. How do you use that risk register into maybe your security metrics? Maybe that's a question. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to grab the mic from you real quick.
I don't know. It's a tough question because risk is ephemeral. It changes as the business evolves over time with new threats. So with the metrics, it's really about I'm reporting the risk up, but nobody necessarily cares about the risk register. They care about specific risks that are high risk at that point in time and how they change over time. So that's probably what I'll say about risk register and how it reports up.
Okay.
That's similar to saying, oh, your annual profit and your quarterly profits and your down to 3 years profitability. But what about the more granular, more in-depth qualities of how do you know it's doing what it's claiming to do, like dark trace or what have you?
Okay, so, and I apologize for those on the phone since we didn't have a mic out there. Let me change it a little bit. How do you measure whether or not your tools are doing what they should be doing? I think that's more of what Ken's trying to get to.
I mean, I think a big thing is, every tool that I've had to buy, I have to have a business case, right? And I have to have ROI that I'm actually going to measure. So to me, the credibility with the board is I have to go back to them and show them that, hey, this tool I told you was going to, cut phishing down 50%. Here's proof that it actually did. So going back and having those conversations is really, really important. The other thing too is, I think a lot of security practitioners can fall into the shiny new object syndrome, right? Where you're like, oh, that does this, we need that, right? And a lot of people don't take into account that, when's the last time you actually sat down with each of your vendors and looked at their roadmaps for that tool, right? Your current product stack. Maybe it could do something that you previously didn't think it could. Yep. For example, Rapid7, that was a product I used for many years for vulnerability management. Well, now if you look at Rapid7, they got, all kinds of stuff. So it's tough because, kind of what JJ's saying, part of this isn't something that the board's going to care about, but if you report to a CIO, they might be, they might care about it a little bit more, but I do think, showing that following up on the business case is critical.
One thing I'd add, you constantly want to be challenging your vendors in security. You should always be thinking security in layers. So if on the endpoint, if you have Microsoft Defender and CrowdStrike and one detects, an infection and the other does not, challenge the vendors and ask them why theirs did not. Validate, have your team validate that you're getting true positives and things like that, and then again challenge the vendors. There's a lot of challenging things with mergers and acquisitions, but one great thing is every acquisition we've had brings a new set of tools, and we often have to do proof of concepts or a bake-off to determine, are we going to stick with what we've had, or the landscape has changed, should we reconsider something else? So it's always important to challenge the status quo and challenge your vendors, ask them the hard questions, and have them demonstrate to you. We get a lot of lip service from these vendors. Have them really show you what it can do. Yeah. And you can talk to your peers too. You can always ask. That's again another nod to Macy and Darren earlier. That's why these networks are so important, so you can talk to your peers and see what's working for them.
No two companies are going to pick the same tools, and even if they do, they're not going to configure them the same way. So you can't necessarily blame the product, because it may be that the product, if had been configured properly, would perform better. The only way you're really going to know is pen tests and red teams. Have somebody come in and say, can you get from point A to point B? And if you can, how did you get there? Et cetera. So that's the final way you'll be able to do it. That's not going to come up in a published standard because, again, no two companies are going to have the same tools and the same configurations.
Yeah, I actually like BAS tools, breach and attack simulation tools, because one of my defense contractors, every tool we brought in, we ran every scenario against the darn thing, and that actually helped us decide on some of our EDR and endpoint tools. Because not only did my red team write things to go around them, but we had a tool that we could just automate and pound the crap out of it for a week. I didn't need 2 months of it in my network. We were done in literally a week, and it was like next. So that's a good way of going. All right, I want to respect everybody's time. Oh, another question in the back. Can we get a mic back there? And I just want to be respectful of everyone on the online.
Actually, I was just going to kind of chirp in on that question right there.
Can you in the mic just so that the people online can hear?
So I was just actually going to chirp in on his question right there, because I'm DOD, and one of the things that he needs to look at is actually going in on the test environment and testing his own products, because really and truly is every individual is going to have their own personal opinion on each product.
Agreed. And
I can put out my own personal list, but that's going to be my own personal opinion. And somebody may like Cisco or, Code 42 or whatever, and that's going to be my opinion. He may have a personal opinion on something. So putting a list out there, it will never happen. So he needs to, whatever 2 or 3 vendors, he needs to put it on a test environment and test his own ideas and figure that out himself.
Agreed. I think there was one more back there real quick. Yeah, I also want to be respectful, and I want to, after this one, if you don't mind, I want to be able to let everybody, I want to kind of tie it up a little bit.
Yeah, so my question is what's the one program that keeps you up at night? Like, if you don't have it yet, kind of what's the top program that you're thinking of, like, implementing? Or, like, one that you've implemented that's like, okay, now I can sleep at night?
Zero trust.
Can you define when you say program? Are you talking about tool, a software?
Initiative, like, main thing on your agenda for the year that you're like, okay, once I get this done, I can sleep at night, or I got this done last year, I'm sleeping better. Kind of what's kind of top of mind?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat this real quick, and then we're going to do speed dating. Quick to get through, because I want to respect everyone. So what is your top initiative that keeps you up at night, that if you could solve, if I'm looking for a head nod, would essentially make you sleep better?
For me, the biggest thing, and since we moved to the cloud, there's another term, right, that is a marketing thing. For me, it was misconfigurations. You know, we had people going and putting things in the cloud that didn't have tons of experience. We had to bring people in, a lot of different hands in place, and understanding continuously if we had misconfigurations is key. For instance, we had a developer. It was in a test environment, but he made it accessible to the internet, right? And at that point, there's an attack vector, right? And that popped up right away. And before I had that tool, it was a scary situation being in the cloud. So understanding those misconfigurations, I pointed out the Capital One fiasco, right? They had an AWS employee that quit or whatever. I forget the whole story around it. Hacked into it, knew about that, the issue with that, and Capital One could have avoided that whole thing if they had just had that continuous scanning and alerts in place to fix that misconfiguration before it got out of hand.
Billy, I'm going to do you next, and again, speed dating. Quick thoughts, go.
Sure. So as I mentioned, their first-time CISO, number one thing for me when I started is visibility. We didn't have visibility into cloud because, so we were worried about misconfigurations. Didn't have great visibility into cloud entitlements, which is probably now my most concerned area because, I don't know every single GCP and AWS IAM role. So for me, we can do access reviews, but if someone's like, yeah, that's what they've always had at school, but what does it actually give them? And GCP does not keep their roles the same from year to year. So for me right now, is locking down some IAM, a little bit more is what I'm really focusing on.
Yeah, I'd say insider risk for me.
Oh, damn. Really? No, I'm kidding.
Dang it.
It's good.
Yeah.
Ditto.
Okay.
Mic drop.
I'd say get visibility into your CI/CD environments and cloud environments. Those are neglected these days.
If you are hit and you're being sued, you're going to be asked to show reasonable security. You need to adopt a framework, whether it be NIST, ISO, CIS-18 is probably the easiest because it's written in English. But you need to have a framework in place to show that you're demonstrating a reasonable security.
Document it and be able to prove it.
Yeah, that was perfect. I would agree with that, and also for your cyber insurance, it's the quickest way for them to dump you and not pay you. And the insider threat, I'm seeing that over and over and over, especially building out a program and actually not like, and not IT products, sorry. It's building a real program of looking at your people and analyzing, and it's more like go hire someone from the government type thing to come in and work for you. Okay, with that, I'm closing the question. Sorry, again, I want to be respectful. I want to big thanks again to the vendors that are still here. Just a quick round of applause, please. Kim, I'm not sure if you're here, and I'm probably just too short to see you. I want to give a big thanks to her and her team for putting this on, and a big thanks to my panel for coming up here and answering the questions and everything.